Well, hello, everybody. We're going to start in just a little bit, but we need to do a couple of tech things. So we're checking the lights and the sound and some other stuff, and then we'll do polar bears. Um, there are 5 of you out there. I don't know what time zones or where, but I'm glad you're here. Okay, we're going to step away, do a couple things, and start this show at 4 o'clock PST.
Hi, it's Andy here. Just ignore me.
Middle of that.
Here?
Yeah.
What about this? I don't think it needs it. You do?
Here, pull it off to the side. If we're going to play any music, we should do it.
I don't have it set up.
Sorry. Okay, I'm just going to give you guys a couple of heads ups on some things. The show is going to be about 80 minutes long, approximately, depending on how things go. There is going to be a break about 2/3 of the way through. I'm going to take a quick break so people can replenish drinks or whatever they want to do. So you have a few minutes if you want to grab something to drink, some popcorn, whatever. That would be a good thing. And we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Yep, mine on airplane. Hello. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. This is so different. When I've done this before, 5 years ago and then 4 years ago, we did it on a set at a theater with an audience. There was blocking and music and all this stuff. It doesn't get more laid back and stripped down than this. So see how it goes. If I have to ask for a line, Andy's here on script. So we're basically just going to have fun. This is my gift to those of you who've never seen this show or have and just want a little bit of this energy at this weird time in the world. So thank you so much for being here. For those of you who may be just logged on, I will tell you again that the whole show is going to be approximately 80 minutes. About 2/3 of the way through that, we're going to take a short 5-minute break, and that's that. So this is polar bears. Ready? Ready?
Ready.
Okay. I never wanted to have kids. I didn't think it would be fair, to them. The way I figured it, a kid needed a parent who would be parental. But me, everyone always said I was immature, unpredictable, spur of the moment, a dreamer, a goofball, a screw up, a mess. And that's the people who liked me. So I decided I would never have kids. And then I got one. I was so depressed. When Gladys, my first wife, told me she was pregnant, I was certain the kid was doomed. But Gladys was optimistic. She wanted kids. She was 34. Her clock was ticking. I was 25. If I had a clock, it was lost, broken, or buried under the seat cushions of my pickup truck. All I could hear was that scared little voice warning me how completely unready I was for fatherhood. Okay, on the positive side, the mature side, I had a good job, working swing shift at a small newspaper in the suburb, mostly production, but with the occasional writing assignment. And I had a nice apartment in a cool old building that used to be a whorehouse. But on the downside, the immature side, well, for one thing, I spent my summers running a game booth at the Renaissance Fair where people paid money to throw mud at my face. And that was my idea. Gladys tried to convince me that my immaturity made me the perfect candidate for fatherhood, since I'd have so much in common with our children. The one thought, the only thought that calmed my fears and gave me a glimpse of fatherhood in which I might not make a total mess of it, that one thought was Christmas. To be specific, Santa Claus. I had very strong ideas about Santa Claus. I had a strong, almost visceral connection to the holidays in general. Cinnamon, gingerbread, steaming apple cider, just cut pine trees leaving sticky, smelly sap on your fingers, the smell of musty, wet sidewalks on a cold winter's day, the sound of wrapping paper tearing, the sound of skates cutting into ice like they're telling you a secret. Shh. I love that sound. I love Christmas. And Santa Claus? Here's the thing. My earliest memory of Santa Claus was the Christmas morning I stopped believing in Santa Claus. I remember sitting on the floor looking at the Christmas tree, my little brain putting two and two together as I became aware that all of the presents from Santa Claus, Rock'em Sock'em Robots, Farm Animal See and Say, they'd all been wrapped in the exact same wrapping paper, polar bear wrapping paper, that all the other presents were wrapped in. All the stuff from my parents to the rest of the family. I knew that wrapping paper. I was with my mom when she bought that wrapping paper. That moment, Me sitting there in my Batman pajamas, it was like watching a popsicle in a frying pan. I could actually feel my belief in Santa melting away, melting into a hot, sticky syrup of thick, sugary disappointment. I mean, I might not have been the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree, but Jesus Christ, Mom and Dad, really? How hard would it have been to get a different wrapping paper for all this stuff from Santa Claus? I read a study once in a magazine. A bunch of child psychologists from Canada studied like 5,000 kids, charting their development from birth to adolescence. And one of the things these experts figured out was that most kids stop believing in Santa between the ages of 7.5 and 11. Now, when it happens on the early side of that, it's usually because an older kid, often a sibling, breaks the bad news. But if a kid somehow makes it to 9 or 10 with their faith intact, then it's over the next few years that they reach the proper stage of cognitive development where they can come to their own conclusions about Santa Claus. In other words, they get old enough to figure it out between the ages of 7.5 and 11. Me, I was 4. Look, I'm not saying I was traumatized or anything. I wasn't. Santa or no Santa, I kept getting presents. The world kept turning. The trees still went up every year, all covered in lights and ornaments. The exquisite thrill of the holidays still went on. But from that moment, I always wondered what it would have been like to have gone on believing, to have, kept that magic alive until I was, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7.5. And I always knew that if I ever had kids, I'd be careful. I'd avoid making the kind of mistakes that force a kid to stop believing before they're ready, before they're cognitively developed enough to do it on their own. I'd be the kind of parent who made their kids' Christmas as magical as Christmas could be. For one thing, I'd avoid wrapping Santa's presents in everyday wrapping paper. In fact, if I ever had kids, that would be my rule number 1. Santa never wraps his presents. Santa's presents just appear. When my daughter Jenna was born, she was beautiful and rubbery and kind of weird, and I loved her immediately. But because she was born in February, I had 10 whole months to wait until my first Christmas as a dad, and nearly 2 years to wait until she'd be cognitively developed enough to appreciate the idea of a magical man and his flying reindeer dropping toys down the chimney in the middle of the night. By then, my rule number 1 had expanded. It had become a whole list of rules. I wrote them down for Gladys. The Santa rules. Rule number 1, Santa never wraps his presents. Rule number 2, no matter how late it is on Christmas Eve or how tired the parents are, Santa's gifts never make the move from the garage to the Christmas tree until I have determined that the kid is in deep REM sleep. Rule number 3, if the kid has left a snack for Santa and Santa has not eaten all of it, then the remains of that snack must never be thrown away somewhere where the kid will find it. All leftovers must be flushed down the toilet. Rule number 4, Santa never delivers unassembled presents. And if a gift did require some assembly, then all wrapping material in which that item arrived must be disposed of somewhere else where the kid will never find it, preferably the trash can of a family at least 2 blocks away. Look, this is all just common sense. When my kids stopped believing, it wasn't going to be because she found half a gingerbread man that she decorated for Santa in the trash with some coffee grounds and an old Brillo pad. It wasn't going to be because I got sloppy with the details. Anyway, there were a whole lot of other rules, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All of them designed so that Jenna could go on believing as long as she wanted to believe. What's the line?
But by the time she turned three,
But by the time she turned 3, I'd begun to realize that Jenna was a bit of a skeptic. I mean, she loved the idea of Santa, but she was just brutal in the way she saw through things, testing everything, asking constant questions. And some of those questions led directly to the invention of brand new Santa rules. Daddy, is Santa Claus a ghost? No. Why would you think Santa's a ghost? Because live people aren't supposed to go in the fireplace when there's a fire in it. That's true. Don't ever go anywhere near the fireplace when there's a fire in it. But no, Santa's not a ghost. Santa's Santa. That's why on Christmas Eve, we always put out the fire in the fireplace at 7 p.m. So it's nice and cool when Santa drops down the chimney. Rule number 11. On Christmas Eve, no fires in the fireplace after 7 p.m. Daddy, how does Santa fit down the chimney if he's so big? Well, he's so heavy, and his bag of toys is so heavy that he just falls down the chimney. Boom. It's the law of gravity. Then Dad, how does he go back up? He doesn't. He leaves through the window. Daddy, if Santa leaves through the window, won't there be boot prints outside by the rose bushes? Yeah. So what do you say on Christmas morning, you and I go out there and see those boot prints for ourselves? Rule number 12. On Christmas morning, there will be a row of boot prints outside by the garden, not tennis shoe prints, boot prints. And under no circumstances can the boots used to make those prints be mine, my shoe size, or the shoe size of anybody in the house, because the kid will go through all of the shoes in the closet and compare them to the boot prints. The thing is, I really did believe that all good parents were doing this kind of thing, doing whatever it takes to imbue the holidays with a sense of mystery and enchantment and magic. And you know what? It worked. Doubts and everything, questions or no questions, Jenna kept on believing. For a few more years anyway. Yeah, Jenna believed in Santa Claus right up until her mother died. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Regardless of my lifelong fear of fatherhood, I discovered that I liked being a dad. It was good, and I was possibly a little better at it than I thought I'd be. I began to believe that me and fatherhood, we were going to work out. Me and Gladys, not so much. Everything that was good about us was eventually crushed under the weight of everything that wasn't. And by the time divorce papers changed hands, we'd had another kid, Andy, born on the 4th of July. Both of my kids were born on the 3rd floor of a hospital that had clearly been designed by people who had only ever built prisons. Seriously, the delivery room was as cold, gray, and unwelcoming as a visitor's room at San Quentin. The whole hospital was like that. Even the gift shop was frightening. The one exception was the nursery. After they were born and inspected and de-umbilicaled, after they were washed, pajamaed, and introduced to their mother's breast, Jenna and Andy, born 17 months apart, were each carried next door to the nursery. where they were cocooned in a warm, softly lit dormitory of little cribs, all the babies wrapped in flower-patterned blankets. There was this enormous plate glass window with soft yellow blinds looking out onto the third floor open air viewing platform. Now, for specific 2-hour periods, 3 times a day, those blinds would be open for friends and family waiting out there on that platform. They would look through the window at the tight little columns of swaddled babies. Eagerly, they'd read the names on all the cribs, pointing when they saw the name they were looking for. Tiffany, Daniel, Julia, Jasper, Jenna, Andy. Jenna and Andy, my kids. After the divorce and my move to a town 45 miles away, Gladys and I agreed that I should be there every morning to take care of the kids after she left for her job as an insurance underwriter in the city. That was her job, insurance. Gladys wrote the policy for the Hubble Space Telescope. It was her proudest moment as an insurance professional. I still had that swing shift job at the newspaper, 3 p.m. to midnight. So every morning as the sun was rising, I would drive sleepily to my kids' house, going right past that hospital where I'd seen my kids' faces for the first time. I would think about that often as I zipped down the freeway at 6 in the morning in my pickup truck, fully aware of the irony that a guy who'd never wanted kids was now completely crazy about his own. Thinking about them, making up plans of things to do with them, worrying about them all the time. And one of the things I worried about a lot, of course, was Christmas. I mean, what if Gladys ignored the Santa rules? Or what if her parents, Elsa and Paul, accidentally gave a wrong answer to a Santa question, or lit a fire in the fireplace after 7 p.m. on Christmas Eve, or used wrapping paper in an unauthorized manner? See, the magic of Christmas is a fragile and delicate thing. One clumsy move can shatter it in a second, like a glass ornament you step on Christmas Eve in bare feet at midnight while trying to open the window by the tree to make it look like Santa used it to leave the house. But that's another story. I read a different study once. The title was something like Parental Insecurity and Guilt Identified as Contributing Factor in Chronic Paternal Overcompensation and Obsessive Behavior Frequently Found in the Fathers of Children of Divorce. Yeah, that was a fun read. It was suggested by certain friends and colleagues at the newspaper that my somewhat heightened concern regarding the kids and Christmas might be tied in with my own feelings of parental insecurity and guilt about suddenly being the father of 2 brand new children of divorce. After all, my parents split up when I was 5. I was raised as a child of divorce myself, so I probably carried some gene for obsessive paternal overcompensation that some dads have and maybe sometimes pass along to their recently divorced adult sons. It was my own dad, actually, who pointed out during one of our regular long-distance phone conversations that I definitely maybe did need to, chill out a little. Not that my dad ever would have said it like that. For one thing, my dad never said anything so succinctly. My dad was a man of many words. He believed that words of wisdom should never be delivered directly in short, concise declarations of fact. Not if they could also be delivered in a series of long, well-rehearsed, and usually kind of true stories. Like his dad before him, like both of his brothers, like all 3 of his sons, my dad was a teller of tales. So when I called him up to give him an update, share some of my worries and concerns, my dad, true to form, responded with a story. Yeah, I don't know if you remember this one, Davey, but this is a couple of years after your mom and I split up. It was late summer, maybe spring. You were 7 or 8. Came by the house to pick you and your brothers up for the day, and Stevie wanted to know what we were going to do. I said I had no idea. So Stevie decided to just go do whatever your mom was doing, and you and Jeffy ran out and jumped in the lemon wagon, and away we went. My dad drove a yellow station wagon, a Ford. We called it the lemon wagon. So we were driving along, and pretty soon we passed by that big red billboard on the side of the road. You remember that billboard, Davy? One that said, "Come on up to Santa's Village." Santa's Village. It was this little amusement park in the mountains about an hour's drive from my dad's house. It was built 5 years before I was born, but it always seemed run down and a little bit seedy. But we loved its little candy cane houses and the bakery where you could get warm gingerbread cookies, the bobsled rides, the Ferris wheel, and the live reindeer that you could feed carrots to if you could stand to get close enough. Reindeer actually smell pretty foul, especially in warm weather. So we just drove on up to Santa's Village, and I don't remember what all we did, but we had a heck of a good time. And then we jumped back in the lemon wagon, and I brought you home. Well, Stevie, poor little guy, when he saw you and Jeffy running up the driveway with your little elf hats and your little candy canes, he was pretty bent out of shape. He'd missed out on getting to go to Santa's Village. My dad's stories didn't always have a clear ending or an obvious point, even when there was one. Thing is, Davy, I know you want to give your kids everything. You want them to be happy, and you should, but you can only do what you can do. You love them. They know it. That's enough, even when it feels like it isn't. In other words, I should chill out a little. So I did, successfully suppressing all impulses to overcompensate for any perceived failings. And I pretty much stayed that way until right around October. With Christmas coming up in a few months, I'd begun to hatch an idea, a way to bring a little extra Santa Claus magic to the kids' first Christmas Eve without Dad at home. It wouldn't be easy. I'd only have the kids for the morning and part of the afternoon. But with the help of a few friends, plus a guy who ran a neighborhood used bookstore, another guy who curated an annual exhibit of historical Santa Claus outfits, the entire weekend crew of the local fire department, the leadership team of the local carpenters union, and a guy named Roberto. 6 hours would be just enough time. Even Gladys had a part to play. When I arrived to pick up the kids, Andy jumped into my arms and elatedly informed me that his mother had just found something mysterious out in the backyard. Dad, Mama found a letter from Santa, accompanied by a red cloth bag containing 2 little felt reindeer antler hats. The letter was the first of 5 clues, the beginning of a treasure hunt. A treasure hunt that would take Jenna, Andy, and me on a day-long adventure with one Christmas Eve wallop of an ending. All 5 clues were written in nice, clean, clear block lettering, carefully drawn by Roberto, a particularly interested and friendly artist in the ad department at my newspaper. Rule number 13. All letters, cards, and gift tags written as if by Santa Claus must be written not by any member of the family with recognizable handwriting, but by Roberto. See, the magic of Christmas, what's the line? Many a childhood fantasy has been obliterated when a child recognizes her handwriting or recognizes her parents' handwriting in a letter from the Easter Bunny, Tooth Fairy, leprechauns, friendly Halloween creatures, or Santa Claus. When leaving correspondence from a fictional character, unrecognizable handwriting is everything. That first clue sent us to a small, mysterious used bookstore downtown where the kids were instructed to approach the counter with their little reindeer antler hats in place and to recite these words. Boo-hoo, what can we do? We're two little reindeer without any clue. Upon hearing these words, the atmospherically gnomish bookseller was to respond with a line of his own. A clue? A clue? You know, I do believe I saw a clue inside one of my books. From high on a shelf in the back of the bookstore, he pulled down a copy of L. Frank Baum's Father Goose and presented it to the kids. Inside was a little gold envelope with the third clue. Tell you the truth, I don't remember where the third clue sent us. But the destination of the fourth clue was the engine room of the downtown fire department. Boo-hoo! What can we do? We're two little reindeer without any clue. A clue? A clue? Yeah. You know, I do believe I saw a clue around here somewhere. Maybe it was on that big red fire truck over there. Why don't you two little reindeer climb on up on that truck and search every inch of it until you find your clue? Look, putting all of this together wasn't as complicated as it might sound. The minute I told people that I was a recently divorced dad creating a treasure hunt for his kids on Christmas Eve, people's hearts and quite a few doors swung wide open. The fifth and final clue was found under a fireman's helmet in the cab of the fire truck. It told us to go downtown to the ice cream parlor where the kids were instructed to get some ice cream and some hot chocolate and to wait until something very mysterious happened. The place was packed. Where Christmas shoppers, families, kids, and grandkids, Jen and Andy were sitting at a table in the middle of the room with their back to the door when they heard it. Ho, ho, ho! They pinwheeled around and there he was, Santa Claus, aka John Wallace, the president of the local carpenters union, aka the white-bearded stepfather of my brother Jeff's girlfriend, Laura. Ho, 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 hello, everyone. Now, while recognizably Kris Kringle, this was a very blue-collar kind of Santa. John believed that on Christmas Eve, Santa would be busy at the North Pole making toys before deciding to take a break to surprise a couple of kids in an ice cream parlor. So when he arrived, he was dressed like he just stepped out of the workshop. He had his work boots on, blue overalls, a bright red shirt. He had his carpenter's belt on with rows and rows of candy canes dangling from it like icicles. Pinned to his shirt was a little button that said, United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners, and another in Latin that said, Labor omnia vincit, work conquers all. Now, who are these two little reindeer here? Wait, don't tell me. You must be Jenna, and you must be Andy. I see you followed all of my clues and arrived just in time. What good, smart little reindeer you are. I think you deserve some of your presents a little early. Here's Mrs. Claus with some things we picked out just for you. Mrs. Claus, aka Lynn, aka my brother Jeff's future mother in law, appeared in the doorway holding some big packages covered in bright gold wrapping paper, the remains of which I had already disposed of in a trash can 2 blocks away from my apartment, where I had wrapped those presents myself that morning before taking them to my brother Jeff's house to drop them off for John to pick up on his way to the ice cream parlor. Amendment to rule number 1. On certain occasions, Santa can wrap his presents, but only when making public appearances in places like ice cream parlors, where unwrapped presents could be confusing and might make Santa look unprofessional. You know, to tell you the truth, to this day, I cannot remember what was in those packages. All I remember is the look on my kids' faces when John set them on the table. Andy couldn't even speak. He just kept staring up at Santa with a look of rapturous joy spreading over every inch of his face. Jenna, uncertain what the traditions and protocols were for events of this magnitude, took the formal approach, extending her hand to shake Santa's. "You are so kind and gentle, Santa. Merry Christmas." Ho, ho, ho! Santa, aka John, aka my future step relative-in-law, started working the room, handing out candy canes from one end to the other before stopping to wave goodbye, before splitting out the back door with Lynn at his side. "Goodbye, little reindeer. Goodbye, everyone. And remember, if you are currently jobless, always consider a career in carpentry and construction. Good jobs for good wages. Merry Christmas." And he was gone. I did it. I did it. I had just given my kids a Christmas Eve they would never forget. And along the way, I had also stumbled into a brand new Santa rule. Rule number 14. For the foreseeable future, Jenna and Andy must never be taken to any family reunion or social function where John and Lynn are likely to make an appearance. I knew it would be difficult to ever surpass the success of that first Christmas, so to tell the truth, I never really tried. A careful observation of the Santa rules would be enough. And over the next few years, Christmas following Christmas, other holidays began to overlap with our lives in significant ways. 4th of July, it was already Andy's birthday, and it was the day that I attended a 4th of July barbecue where I met Susan, who I would eventually marry. A geologist with a highly developed sense of wonder about the universe, but no measurable connection to Santa Claus. She couldn't even remember how old she was when she stopped believing. But she could tell you every detail of the day she first visited the Natural History Museum with her brownie troop. Or it was New Year's Day, that was our first date. And then there were the holidays that overlapped with various medical emergencies. Valentine's Day, when Andy caught a weird, scary virus and had a temperature of 103. The St. Patrick's Day, when Jenna caught a baseball with her face and had to have surgery to repair her broken nose. And the Easter Sunday, when, as I was bringing the kids back from a day in the park, Gladys pulled me aside to tell me that she'd found a sore spot in her neck near her lymph nodes, and she was going to the doctor the next day to have it checked out. Well, it was lymphoma, fairly advanced. She had lung cancer too. By Halloween, she'd had several rounds of chemo and 2 bouts of pneumonia and was pretty much losing the battle on all of it. That year, Susan and I took the kids trick-or-treating in their neighborhood while Gladys stayed home to hand out candy to trick-or-treaters. She was dressed as a fortune teller, a bright yellow scarf covering her now hairless head. Gladys marked her 43rd birthday in the hospital and passed away 2 days before Thanksgiving. The kids knew their mom was sick, of course. I mean, how could they not? But Gladys never actually told them she was dying. In fact, hoping for a miracle, I guess, she kept telling them, promising them she'd get better. Told them they could count on it. She talked about all the things they'd do together again when she was feeling better, even just going to Chuck E. Cheese for pizza, the kid's favorite restaurant. Andy loved the video games. Jenna had a lot of hard questions about that talking rat. So through all that, the kids just kept waiting for their mom to get better. And in a way, I think so was she. I mean, Gladys was a fighter. No one knew that better than I did. I think she believed that if she ever told them the truth, actually spoke the word terminal, actually heard herself saying that word to her kids, that her fight would be over. Several weeks before she died, I had taken the kids to the zoo. As she got sicker and sicker, they were spending more and more time with me. Most weekends, they stayed over at the house I now shared with Susan. That day at the zoo, after lunch, we stopped for a while to watch the polar bears. On the fence in front of us was a display of interesting polar bear facts. Hey guys, look. Polar bears weigh between 750 and 1,500 pounds. Polar bears can swim up to 40 miles in the open sea at a speed of 4 miles per hour. Due to their inherent strength and toughness, polar bears can withstand long walks on the ice and freezing temperatures, aided by a thick layer of fat beneath their skin. Polar bear cubs are raised exclusively by the mother, who is abandoned by the father just hours after mating. Due to climate change and habitat loss, polar bears are officially an endangered species. Row, row, row. Down on all fours now, Andy was trying to capture the thick, muscular, padded, fat, insulated body language of the average polar bear, while Jenna continued to study those facts on the fence. Daddy, what's an endangered species? Oh, that's any group of animals that is in danger of becoming extinct. Extinct? That means they're not alive anymore. Means they're all gone. Daddy, is mommy an endangered species? I really don't remember what I said to Jenna. I just remember thinking, this is too much. This is too big. I mean, how am I ever going to handle this? And how am I ever going to break the news to the kids that what they were told they could count on wasn't exactly true? Gladys died on a Tuesday morning. I'd taken the kids out of school for a few days. They were over at my house, and that morning I could see them across the house playing on the floor in the back room when the phone call came in the kitchen from Debbie, Gladys's little sister. Susan stood nearby, her face a question that already knew the answer. I could not tell the kids right away. I needed a plan. So Susan stayed with the kids while I took a walk to try and figure out how to do this. Maybe maybe I should bring something nice, something sweet to undercut the sadness when I told them. Donuts? No, too run of the mill. A cake? Nah, too macabre. Cakes are for birthdays, not death days. I finally settled on some really good, really expensive chocolate truffles. You could buy a whole box of donuts for what those truffles cost. That's how sweet they were. Back at the house, I called the kids over to the gray steamer trunk that we used as a coffee table. Hey guys, I have some bad news. I let them each pick a truffle, and they had them half eaten before I could force myself to break the news that I knew would break their hearts. So, you know that your mom has been really sick lately, right? And she's been fighting really hard to get better. Well, this morning she couldn't fight anymore. And she passed away. She died. Your mom died. I'm so sorry. The kids didn't even stop chewing. My strongest memory of this moment is just their little faces, their eyes wide and suddenly overflowing with tears, their little mouths chewing their chocolate the whole time. There were lots of hugs and lots more tears and lots of questions. Jenna was still sobbing when she took Buddy, the cat, into the bathroom to break the bad news. Andy was the first to stop crying and start trying to wrap his head around this monumental betrayal of all that was fair and right. I mean, he was so sad, but now he was also angry. Why did mommy lie? She promised. Mommy promised. She said she'd get better again. She said we'd all she said we'd all get to go together to Chuck E. Cheese. She said, but she lied. The wonderful thing about kids is that, for a while anyway, they believe the things we tell them. That's a good definition of innocence, a state of not knowing that people will lie to you. And we do lie to kids. I mean, mostly for good reason, mostly to protect, to comfort and console, to entertain and amuse. But the reason doesn't make them feel any better when they finally learn the truth. That afternoon, as a much needed distraction, Susan and I took the kids to the movies. We picked The Santa Claus with an E at the end. It's the Disney movie with Tim Allen as a divorced dad who accidentally kills Santa Claus and is then contractually obligated to take his place, becoming a better man and a better dad in the process. About 15 minutes into the movie, when Santa slips and falls from the roof to his death, I was thinking, oops. Should have picked a different movie. Should have taken the kids to see The Lion King again. That one's still in the theaters. But wait, no, in that one, Simba's dad dies. What is it with Disney movies? But after a while, the kids got into it. Somehow they were able to stop crying and start laughing. Say what you will about it being a B movie. That afternoon for 90 minutes, The Santa Claus with an E was the best movie in the world. If nothing else, it was our last moment of calm before the funeral. You know, a lot of people don't tell you this, but death is exciting. Not happy walking through the gates of Disneyland exciting, but intense, adrenalized, heart pumping exciting, like riding a motorcycle across a crumbling city in the middle of a massive earthquake, only with cookies. Death also brings cookies. As Gladys's parents, Elsa and Paul, kicked off the ancient, somber machinery of funeral preparation, choosing a mortuary, a coffin, a burial plot, Susan's mom, Mary Evelyn, sent over a big plate of cookies. The first of dozens and dozens of cookies that we would receive between now and Christmas. Shit, Christmas. Technically, Gladys died at the beginning of the holiday season. Something told me that Christmas in our house would never be quite the same. When I'd called my dad right after Gladys died to tell him, my dad did something that he reserved for only the most sensitive and solemn of occasions. He elected not to tell any stories. Instead, my dad said the one thing to me I most needed to hear at that moment. Davy, I'll be there tomorrow. You know the sound an airplane makes when it's flying along, just maintaining altitude, shooting ahead through the clouds and the fog, that weird otherworldly hum an airplane makes. Well, that's what the next few days sounded like. I know a lot of things must have happened, but mostly I remember the hum. My first clear memory is from the day before the funeral. Now, Gladys's mom, Elsa, was a lifelong Catholic and staunch believer in God, tradition, and the healing power of family rituals. She pretty much insisted that the kids attend the funeral and the viewing of the body the night before the funeral. Gladys deserved to have her children pay their respects. My dad was with me every step of the way that week, with my stepmom, Joan, at his side. The day of the viewing, they offered to take the kids to the movies to give me a bit of a break. I suggested the Santa Claus with an E. They picked the Lion King. That day, as I was doing whatever I had to do, I was just dreading that evening. The moment when I would stand there at the coffin with my kids, staring at the body of the woman who used to be their mother. The mother that, come to think of it, they'd never actually gotten a chance to say goodbye to. I went to the store and picked up a cheap cassette tape recorder and a couple of blank cassettes. That night before the viewing, at dinner at Burger King, one of the big ones with playground and a ball crawl, I gave each kid a blank cassette and told them that if they wanted to, they could record a goodbye message for their mom, and we'd leave it in the casket later on when they paid their respects. Jenna, after some thought, took the recorder into a stall in the bathroom where it was nice and echoey and sang her mom the little African Zulu chant from the beginning of The Circle of Life, the song that starts The Lion King. Nan sinyama papakisi baba si tiamengunyama nan sinyama papakisi baba si tiamengunyama. Jenna didn't speak Zulu. She didn't know what that meant, but to her, she was singing goodbye. Andy, feeling shy, buried himself in the ball crawl. He pulled the tape player down beneath 1,000 multicolored balls and whispered his own soft 7-year-old farewell, making sure to catch his mom up on all the news since she left. Andy was trying so hard to understand all the bizarre activities the adults around him were engaged in. And everyone was crying, but they were planning a party. His grandmother was so sad, but everyone was sending her flowers, which she usually got on her birthday, which usually made her happy. He was watching everything, listening intently, trying to figure out how to say and do whatever all these confusing people expected of him. But nothing seemed to make any sense, right up to and including the moment of the viewing. Now, Andy and Jenna were used to standing in line for things, but most of the time they looked forward to reaching the end of the line. As we slowly moved toward the coffin, voices from the folks in front floated back as a long line of mourners each stopped and took their turn looking in at Gladys's body, a wig now covering the thin, short hair that never had a chance to grow back. Each voice offered a significant whispered word or two. Some of those voices that floated back to us said that Gladys still looked so beautiful. Others said she looked so at peace, so radiant, so angelic, so serene. When we finally reached the coffin, the kids peered in at their mom for several long seconds before Andy stepped up and took his own crack at saying something significant. She looks so despicable. Despicable. Andy really had no idea what it meant, but it was a big, thick, chewy grown-up word, and it was the best he could do under pressure. I knew how he felt. I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, this wasn't anything I'd ever planned for. I didn't know what the rules were for this. What did my kids need? What did I need? Was I allowed to show any emotion? Do ex-husbands get to cry at their ex-wife's funeral? And how much longer was I supposed to stand there with the kids, all eyes on Jenna and Andy, forcing them to feel all that pressure? After a few moments, they tucked their cassette tapes into the coffin next to their mom's body, and I led them back to our seat where we sat and watched as everybody else took their turn. It lasted forever, and all that time I was thinking, you know what? This is despicable. It is. I mean, whatever went wrong between Gladys and I, this is not how I want my kids to remember their mom. This isn't the last memory I want them to have of her. A little bit later on, as we were driving away from the parking lot, having made plans to meet back at the mortuary in the morning for the procession to the church, Jenna started singing softly beside me in her seat. And I had an idea. Who wants ice cream? I turned the car around, stopping for ice cream before making a left and heading up to the hospital where Jenna and Andy had been born. In the elevator, I pushed the button for the 3rd floor while the kids still clutched their ice cream cones. What was this thing I had about giving the kids sugar right before something tricky was going to happen? The elevator doors open and I led them down the hallway and out onto the 3rd floor open air viewing platform. The nursery blinds were still open. Yes. And so we lined up at the window and looked in at the little columns of swaddled babies. Jenna and Andy had no idea why we were there. Eating ice cream, looking at a bunch of little sleeping babies. Though I'm sure they thought it was a whole lot better than what I'd just taken them to. I dropped down to my knees between the two of them. So, this makes me think of The Lion King. In the movie, when Simba is born, all the animals gather together to sing the circle of life, right? Everybody is born like Simba, like these babies, like you, and everybody dies like Simba's dad and like your mom. There were deaths and then births, and then more deaths and then more births. There are beginnings and endings, and then more beginnings and more endings, and that's the circle of life. You both just saw your mom for the last time. I just wanted you to see the place where you saw her for the first time. I have no idea if any of this helped Jenna and Andy understand what was going on any better, but it was the best I could do under pressure. The next morning, Susan helped the kids get into their funeral clothes chosen by Elsa to reflect the somber tone of the day. The day had started out cold and rainy, but was beginning to clear by the time we all arrived at the church. Elsa met me outside and pulled me aside and asked me if I would consider delivering a eulogy during the service, the one detail that she had forgotten to arrange. The service was in 30 minutes. I seriously considered it for about 5 seconds before deciding that winging my ex-wife's eulogy was just kind of asking for disaster. I did, however, agree to be one of the pallbearers helping to carry Gladys into the church. Jenna clung close to the grandparents, while Andy stood by my side as the hearse with the coffin pulled up to the curb. First, there was a quick pallbearer training session. The funeral director was a portly gentleman with an expression permanently fixed between a weary, sober, I've seen this all before face, and cheerful, businesslike, let's just make the best of this face. He expressed his condolences, gave us some quick ergonomic tips about lifting a casket, and showed us a helpful diagram of the path we'd take across the sidewalk, up the steps, and into the foyer, where a shiny metal gurney on wheels would take Gladys the rest of the way. Andy hovered nearby, watching as the pallbearers slid the coffin out of the hearse and onto one of those weird funereal coffin launching pad things, and then all stood waiting for the signal to begin. Hey, Andy. How you doing, kiddo? You doing okay? Yeah, I'm doing okay. I kind of wanted to be a polar bear too. A polar bear. We couldn't help it. All the big, tall pallbearers standing on the sidewalk, we all started crying. Maybe to Andy, the idea of people holding coffins being called polar bears wasn't any weirder than anything else he'd been witnessing. I mean, clearly adults had no idea what was going on. They were confused about everything. I mean, how many times over the last few months had some grown-up told him that everything was going to be fine, that his mom would get better and everything would be the same again? And maybe it made a kind of sense for coffin carriers to call themselves polar bears. I mean, Polar bears are tough, right? Polar bears can handle anything. We moved aside and let Andy step in. He reached out and took hold of the handle on the coffin. A moment later, we got the signal and we all lifted and started moving away from the hearse toward the church. Andy was smiling now, actually beaming as he walked with us, though tears were rolling down his face. Maybe to Andy, his little heart broken, he was thinking that you can handle this now, even this, because broken hearts are no broken hearts. He was strong enough to take it now. He was tough enough. He was a polar bear. End of Act 1. Okay, we're going to take a break. About 5 minutes. You can replenish your drink if you like. Please come back. I promise it gets funny again. And you are not going to want to miss the end of the story.
Hi, everybody. I just noticed a couple more people joined on. So this is intermission, and we're going to get back in 2 minutes. My dad's going to get back. See you in 2 minutes.
Okay, ready for Act 2? This is going to be the fun one because I get to use some props in Act 2, so it'll be a little different than last time. Here we go. We all coped in different ways that first Christmas without Gladys. Jenna spent a lot of time thinking. She had long conversations with the cat. Andy, officially done with the sad stuff now, turned his attention to Christmas lists, Christmas decorations, and Santa Claus. Susan, facing her first holiday season with 2 grieving kids in the house, focused on food, laundry, and the messy mysteries of pre-adolescent toothbrushing time. And let me take the lead where Christmas was concerned. To that end, I coped by sticking hard to what I knew best. In spite of the sadness now hanging over our suddenly crowded little house, I was determined to make this Christmas better, happier, and more magical than ever. I just didn't know how. Ever since the funeral, friends had been reaching out, sending their love and support, mostly in the form of cookies. By the first weekend in December, our tiny kitchen was overflowing with plates, platters, and ornamental tins crammed with Christmas cookies. Cookies in the shape of snowflakes, stars, Santa Clauses, reindeer, and ironically, a fair number of polar bears. Rule number 15. Under certain circumstances, including a sudden urgent need to make everyday activities as special as possible and a coincidental overabundance of Christmas cookies, gingerbread, shortbread, and snickerdoodles are an acceptable alternative to breakfast cereal. It was very important, I decided, that the kids be taken to the mall to see Santa as soon as possible. Now, a lot of people won't admit this, but the real purpose of shopping mall Santas is not to fill the lives of children with wonder and joy. It's to provide parents with a feasible mechanism for determining what it is their kids want Santa to bring them on Christmas morning. Letters to Santa? Not reliable. For one thing, some parents just aren't comfortable opening mail not addressed to them. It's so much easier to just plop your kid on Santa's lap and pretend to be staring at the Victoria's Secret display across the aisle while eavesdropping on the conversation between your kid and the guy in the beard. The day that Susan and I took Jen and Andy to the mall, as we waited in line, I was filled with this rush of emotion, watching the faces of my kids who just lost so much, peering in various degrees of wonder through the little picket fence that separated us from Santa Claus. On the spot, I invented rule number 16. If your mom dies just before Christmas, anything you ask Santa for, you get. 20 minutes later, I added an amendment to rule number 16. If your kid's mom dies just before Christmas, don't be surprised if they ask for something no shopping mall Santa has the authority to agree to. Andy went first. He asked for a horse. Jenna, probably remembering that Christmas Eve when Santa or someone sent her on an enchanted treasure hunt adventure, her cognitive development wrestling hard with her childlike desire to believe anything is possible, hopped into Santa's lap and looked hopefully into his big bearded face. Good afternoon, Santa. You probably remember me. I'm Jenna. I assume you've heard that my mom just died. So here's what I'm thinking. I don't really need any presents this year. But if you can make my mom alive again, then you can give all my presents to some other little girl. Deal? The surprising thing about Santa's reaction is that Santa didn't seem all that surprised. Evidently, when you ask hundreds of kids a day what they want more than anything in the world, having one or two of them ask for a mom back from the grave or a dad home from prison is a strong statistical possibility. I'm very sorry for your loss, Jenna, but your mother is an angel in heaven now, and I'm simply not allowed to take angels out of heaven. Heaven needs them all too much. Would it be all right if I just brought you a horse? Jenna agreed to the horse, but she never really believed in Santa again. On the way home, we stopped to get a Christmas tree. And with our glistening new Douglas fir reclining in the back of my pickup truck, we then headed downtown to Marissa's Fantasia to buy an angel for the top of the tree. Now, Marissa's Christmas Fantasia is where everyone in town went for Christmas decorations. If Santa's village could be condensed into a single storefront wonderland, Marissa's Fantasia would be it. Dozens and dozens of trees stood here and there throughout the multi-story shop, each one an explosion of ornaments, all with different themes. Santa's Workshop, the Nutcracker, Pirates of the Caribbean, each with its own unique tree topper, stars, pirates, angels. I don't remember if it was Jenna or Andy who suggested that we should get an angel that looked like their mother, but it didn't take us long to find one that both kids agreed was just about perfect. The place was packed. We stood in line together, moving slowly toward the counter, where a cashier in a flowing dress and an exuberantly multicolored scarf on her head, like a tarot reader from the Renaissance Fair, was taking her time with all the customers, laughing, asking questions. When we finally arrived and handed over the angel, she just gazed at it for a moment. This one is one of my favorites. I see she speaks to you too. The cashier wasn't talking to Susan or me. She was talking to Jenna and Andy. When Jenna said that the angel was their mother, who had just died of cancer and was now living in heaven, the woman just stared at them for a second before moving out from behind the counter. Before we knew what was happening, she had dropped to her knees in front of the kids and enfolded them in her arms. Then with a big, bright smile, she pulled off her scarf, which fluttered away, revealing her beautiful, entirely hairless head. I've been going through chemo for the last few months, and who knows, I might be an angel myself someday. But I think that if I were lucky enough to be the mother of two children as sweet and thoughtful as you two, then I would be honored to be a beautiful angel like this one, watching over you from my place on the tree. Rule number 17. Until further notice, every year at Christmas, this angel goes up on our tree. You know, through it all, Susan was a trooper, evolving as quickly as possible to keep up with all the changes piling up alongside all those cookies, which seemed to just keep coming as we got closer to Christmas. Convincing her to accept the Santa rules, that took some doing, especially the one requiring us to hold off putting any presents under the tree until the kids are deep, deep, deep asleep. Turns out kids don't actually fall asleep on Christmas Eve. At the newspaper, Roberto was happy as ever to keep writing the notes and gift tags intended as correspondence from Santa Claus. And on Christmas Eve, with Susan's help, the illusion and magical manifestation of Santa's midnight arrival was carried out with crack efficiency and an admirable amount of grace. In the morning, the tree with the Gladys angel securely in its place was absolutely beautiful. And the number of presents under the tree was staggering. The family had been especially generous that year, and when Jenna and Andy awoke, the sharp sting of their recent loss was briefly buried beneath the glittering mountain of presents and tinsel and toys that awaited them. And what did Santa Claus bring Jenna and Andy that year? Horses. You know, it's funny. A week later, on New Year's Day, we all gathered to sit at the kitchen table as Jen and Andy wrote their thank you notes, including, at Andy's insistence, a thank you to Santa Claus. It's ironic, isn't it? For years, I'd been busting my butt to make sure that the kids could believe in Santa until they were ready to stop. I'd been so afraid of being a failure at fatherhood that I had committed myself heart and soul to a plan in which another guy, let's face it, an imaginary guy, was getting all the credit for all the cool stuff I was doing, all the magical things I was bringing them. Susan said it was my guy side, the side that says there's nothing broken that can't be fixed with sheer effort, muscle, and blindly hoping for the best. She may not have said it quite so nicely. As the next few weeks went by, we all adjusted, bumping along as best we could. With Christmas finally over and the cookies having finally stopped coming, I had to start serving the kids actual food for breakfast. Fortunately, I make great grilled cheese sandwiches. I quit my job at the newspaper, swapping the swing shift for a part-time morning job at a smaller newspaper so I could be home in the afternoon when the kids needed me after school. And Susan, well, it turns out Susan had never really seen herself as mother material. As hard as our new life was on me and Jenna and Andy, it was probably hardest on her. Still, that July, about as far from Christmas as the calendar could take us, under a tree in her brother's backyard, Susan married me. The kids participated in the ceremony, bringing in baskets of flower petals and then standing under the multicolored snowstorm as Susan and I showered them with petals. And then life went on. Whenever things got complicated, I'd call my dad. He'd tell me some stories. I'd pick up a crumb or two of fatherly wisdom and just keep going, doing what I could do the best I knew how. And through it all, in the back of my head, I was just waiting for the next Christmas. But when fall came, with Thanksgiving right around the corner, as the shops began to fill again with holiday decorations, the season brought with us this sense of sadness and gloom hanging over everything, blocking the Christmas spirit the way clouds block the sun. The whole month of November had become layered with the hard, sharp heaviness of loss. And it didn't help that Buddy, the cat, had recently taken a stroll across the street at the wrong moment. After burying him in the backyard, I decided that I needed to do something to elevate the mood, to find a way to mark the soon-to-arrive first anniversary of Gladys's death by doing something upbeat, or at least something significant. So that year, we started a new tradition, one we would continue to follow for years to come. We huddled on the couch together, ate really good chocolate, and all watched The Santa Claus with an E. Now officially our family's favorite Christmas movie. And what did Santa bring the kids that year? A brand new, empty, unwrapped cat carrier with a letter from Santa Claus, with a little help from Roberto. Dear Jenna and Andy, I know it's been a hard year, but I am so proud of you both. Jenna, congratulations on the A+ on your science test. Have you ever considered becoming an astronaut? And Andy, you have been working very hard on doing your chores on time. That makes me, Santa, very, very happy. I am very sorry that Buddy the cat died. Here's a cat carrier for you so your dad can take you to the pound to pick out a new cat. I hope the new cat is very nice to you because you both deserve a nice cat very, very much. Please, don't let him go out in the street. Merry Christmas, Mr. C. A year later, when November rolled in again, it brought with it once again that terrible sense of gloom. So once again, we found ourselves in the living room with chocolate and popcorn, watching The Santa Claus with an E. There was a strange sort of comfort in that ritual. If nothing else, it felt good to just laugh together. The exploding turkey and the elves with attitude were always reliably hilarious, and even Santa's death at the beginning of the movie was starting to seem kind of funny. No, to everyone but Andy, that is. Andy had come to strongly identify with the character of Charlie, the little boy who refuses to stop believing that his father has become the new Santa Claus. For years, Andy's favorite book had been The Polar Express. He read it over and over again, savoring every word, especially the ending, when the narrator, once a little boy, now all grown up, admits that he still believes that he alone can still hear the ringing of the magic sleigh bell. Jenna, meanwhile, was feeling the pressure to stay in the Santa closet. I mean, she pretty much stopped believing, but she was afraid to just hang that out there, especially at home with all the Santa energy in the house. Besides, what if she was wrong? She picked up a few tips from Susan about the scientific method, and that year she devised a deviously ingenious test to determine once and for all if Santa really existed. She secretly wrote a letter to Santa. She asked for a puppy. She secretly mailed the letter on her way home from school. And then she wrote another letter to Santa, one she never intended to mail, one intended only for me. Dad, please send to Santa. You can read if you want to. Dear Santa, I don't know if you are real, though Dad says you are real. If you are real, well, then I would appreciate it if you would prove it. Please bring me something that doesn't come from China or Korea or even America. Something that could only have come from your workshop at the North Pole. I don't actually care what it is. A wooden dinosaur or something. Whatever. Just bring me something that my dad couldn't have bought in a store. Merry Christmas. Respectfully yours, Jenna. Rule number 18. Santa must never bring a gift that was made in China or Korea or even America. All gifts from Santa must have plausibly been made by elves in a workshop in the North Pole. I visited 3 farmers markets, 6 toy stores, and 2 craft fairs before finding the perfect wooden dinosaur. It was made by a retired carpenter who sold toys at open-air markets on the weekends. It was carved out of unfinished pine. It had no labels, no markings, just wood, wheels, and teeth. That Christmas morning, when Jenna came into the room and saw that little wooden dinosaur sitting on the bricks of the fireplace, and no puppies anywhere, I could tell by the look on her face that something had changed. It wasn't the look of a little girl who just received from Santa what she was hoping for. It was something else. It was a young lady receiving the final confirmation of something she'd long suspected. Jenna finally knew for sure. It was her time. Jenna was 10 years old, and she was officially over Santa Claus. Yes, I had done it. One of my kids believed in Santa 6 whole years longer than I did. And Andy, he did even better than that. Andy believed in Santa Claus until he was 11. And then 12. And then 13. As Andy turned 14 on the 4th of July, he was still looking forward to Santa's next arrival in December, even though, and he was fully aware of this, he was the only soon-to-be high schooler he knew who still believed. For years, I had followed the Santa rules religiously, meticulously making sure that I did nothing to spoil the illusion. Honestly, though, as Jenna and then all of Andy's friends, one by one, stopped believing, stepped out of the Santa closet, I'd begun to wonder, as Andy's faith never faltered, if maybe my commitment to keeping the magic of Christmas alive had possibly backfired. To give Andy a gentle hint, I had reluctantly been relaxing on some of the Santa rules, stopping with the boots in the garden and the ceremonial flushing of the extra cookies that Andy still faithfully left out for Santa every 24th of December. Eventually, I had dispensed with everything but the Santa gift itself, and through it all, Andy just kept on believing. And now he was 14. What did that magazine article say? Those psychologists from Canada said most kids stop believing between 7.5 and 11. Wow. Andy had just joined the unsung ranks of the all-time Santa believing world champions. The question is, had I given my kids a wonderful, incredible, beautiful gift? Or had I committed some bizarrely Christmassy form of accidental child abuse? At that point, it didn't matter because there was nothing I could do about it. Because all by himself, Andy had developed his own Santa rules. Rule number 1, when kids stop believing in Santa, Santa stops believing in them. Rule number 2, if parents insist on playing Santa and leaving gifts in his name, then Santa stops delivering to that house because those kids are taken care of. Rule number 3, it doesn't matter how old you are. If you still believe, Santa will never abandon you. I had visions of myself at age 50, 60, 70, still doing this. That November, by which point we had watched the Santa Claus with an E so many times that the original VH tape had actually worn out. My dad called to check in. I told him everything. I told him about my job, where I was getting new and harder writing assignments. Told him about the Santa rules, my own somewhat clearly dubious parenting skills, Andy believing in Santa as a freshman in high school, all of it. My dad listened without judgment. And then, funny you should talk about rules, Davy. I remember when you were a little thing, you and your brothers, no taller than a yardstick. Your mother followed all the rules. She kept you tidy and safe, clean as a whistle, kept you out of harm's way. And then you all started coming down with colds. I remember she told the doctor, it doesn't make any sense. They're getting sick. I've been following all the rules. Doctor said, the only problem with these boys is they're too clean. They should get out in the dirt some, develop a resistance. So I went home and took a shovel into the backyard and I dug a big hole. I got the garden hose out, filled that hole with water. And when the dirt turned to mud, I brought you boys out and I said, you should all take off your clothes and have a little fun. By the end of the day, you were covered in mud from head to toe and pretty much happy as pigs in slop. You all stopped getting colds right away. The thing is, Davy, there really aren't any rules. Oh, we think there are. We try. But with being a parent or being an adult or playing Santa, the only rule that really matters is that we love our kids the way it makes the most sense to at the moment. And Santa, all Santa ever was a way to show our kids that we're happiest when they're happy. The day I told Andy the truth about Santa Claus was one of the hardest days of my life. When I told him about their mom dying, at least I'd had a few moments to plan. At least then I'd brought truffles. We were all home, and out of the blue, Andy told me that at school he told a friend that he still believed in Santa. The friend told some other kids, and pretty soon they were all teasing him, taunting Andy for still believing. So he told him he was only kidding. He knew Santa wasn't real. And then he looked at me as if I alone would understand what he'd gone through. And with a hint of pride at his clever use of deception with those kids, he told me that he'd only been pretending. He didn't care what they said. He knew that Santa was real, and he would always believe that Santa was real. I knew right then that the moment I was waiting for, the moment when Andy would be ready to stop believing all on his own, was never going to happen. Not without a bit of a push. Well, Andy, speaking of that, I have some bad news. See, the thing is, the truth is that Santa is me. I mean, I'm not the real Santa, like in the Santa Claus with an E. I mean, there really isn't any Santa. Exactly. I mean, I've been eating the snacks. I've been leaving the boot prints. I'm sorry. I'm just sorry. I just wanted you to have the magic that I never had. You did it all? You did all that? You left the presents? You left the clues in the treasure hunt? Why would you do that? Why would I play Santa? Well, because I want you to be happy. No, no. Why did you lie to me? The way Mom did when she told me she'd get better. Why would anyone do that? Oh, there was nothing I could say. Nothing that would make any sense to Andy at that moment. He hadn't cried that hard since Gladys died, but that afternoon, as I sat there helpless, he cried like a little boy who just lost his mother. Rule number 19. A strict adherence to the Santa rules does not guarantee success. In fact, on certain occasions, you can still break someone's heart. I had just broken my son's heart for the second time. The thing is, there's really nothing that unusual about that. I mean, parents break their kids' hearts all the time. Kids break their parents' hearts all the time. And then, most of the time, we find a way to help each other heal. Love is the stuff that holds the cracks together. Sounds like something my dad would say. But you know, the day that Andy lost Santa Claus, so did I. I never played Santa again. So, how did I deal with that? I was covering a film festival for my newspaper when, on a whim, I asked the filmmaker that I was interviewing if he remembered how old he was when he stopped believing in Santa Claus. I don't even know why I asked it. But instead of looking at me funny, this old grizzled filmmaker said, "Now that is a moment I will never forget." And he told me his story. He was 10 years old, living in Boston. It was 2 days before Christmas. He was standing at a bus stop with his parents in front of a bar. Suddenly, the bar doors swung open, and there at the end of the counter was Santa Claus, one of the Salvation Army kind. As the boy looked, Santa pulled down his beard, lifted a shot glass, and threw back a shot of whiskey, and then let the beard snap back into place. And then he saw the kid. The whole bar saw the kid. And 50, 60 years later, this professional filmmaker with an Oscar nomination still remembered that moment, watching that room full of adults watch his 10-year-old face fall as the truth about Santa clicked into place. Hearing that story, something clicked for me. And ever since, whenever I've interviewed somebody interesting, I try to find a way to slip in the question, how old were you when you stopped believing? Robin was 6. He said that it just dawned on him that Santa probably wouldn't be wrapping his presents in newspaper, and poof, there went Santa. Bo was the son of a famous actor, comedian, musician. He told me about the time his dad reluctantly admitted that all those times he'd taken Bo up on the roof to look at Santa's boot prints, he'd left those prints himself. Bo said that he was pretty angry for a while until it dawned on him that his dad was actually pretty old to be climbing a ladder onto the roof just to make the presents under the tree a little more magical. Julie was 11. In her house, Santa didn't just leave a present. He left everyone a poem, handwritten. Eventually, Julie recognized her mother's handwriting, a classic blunder. But you know what? When she was old enough to have kids of her own, Santa started leaving poems for her kids, typewritten in red ink. What I have learned is that Andy is not alone. I have met people who believed in Santa as long as Andy did, some even longer. And what I found is that for every Andy who pushes, stretches out their faith beyond that of their friends and siblings, for everybody who pushes the envelope of average cognitive awareness, there are thousands of others who maybe didn't get to believe in Santa as long as they deserved. And who says that magic has to have an expiration date? Jenna and Andy are all grown up now. They don't have kids of their own yet, but maybe someday. I asked them recently what they think they'll tell their own kids about Santa if the time comes, and they both said the same thing. They have no idea. They'll figure it out when they get there. Till then, the best I can offer them as advice is this story. The story of how, when I thought I had nothing to give, I just gave the best I had. And somehow, we all made it through. Because that's what people do. Santa or no Santa, broken hearts or no broken hearts. Through losses, lies, and the beautiful backfires that come from just loving each other. Sometimes we find that we are strong enough to make it. We're tough enough. We're polar bears. Thank you. It's so weird that I'm getting choked up. I performed this so many times, but the intimacy of the internet and seeing you out there. Thank you. This was actually really fun. So yeah, this. If you're wondering, this is a true story. Mostly. I mean, memory is a weird thing, right? This is as close as I could come to what I remember of this time. Anyway, thank you for sharing this moment with me. I get to do this again tonight in a few hours, so that'll be fun. But wow, what a blast! Thank you for making this possible, and I hope that this was meaningful to all of you out there. Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy holidays, and if you feel like it and you can, and you want to tell somebody else about this, we'll see what the second show is like. I'm all warmed up now. So again, thank you very much. Good night. Merry Christmas.